Right, hi folks. What I'm going to talk about today is all contained in the Common Home Plan. Now, you can get them if you haven't seen it before. The Common Home Plan is the green one, and it's the full details. A little more technical, but because we're keen to reach out beyond people that maybe don't want to know the exact kilowatt hours, we've got an orange one with some nice pictures which you might give to your auntie. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe she's the one that wants all the detail and you just want the pictures. I don't know. Right, so let me put this in context first of all. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to quickly talk over how Scotland gets to 0-0. I'm not interested in net zero. It's not good enough. If you can find some carbon, stop it. If you can see some plastic, stop using it. If you've got a pesticide that you don't need, don't use it. It's got to be 0-0. That's the reality of where we're getting to with the state of the world just now. But I also want to put it in a bigger context, which is, it's hard not to look out the window and feel concern and despair about what's happening in the world just now. I've described where we are as an Archduke Ferdinand moment. The grinding of the tectonic plates of geopolitical change are being kicked off by events in the Middle East. And if you look at what happened the last time, it took us a world war, a depression, and a world war before we realised the solution was a comprehensive process of building international institutions of peace, collaboration, and communication, and a massive rebuilding programme, a big new deal. It was only for Europe the last time, and it needs to be the world this time. So why don't we just skip the 2 world wars and the depression and go straight to a global plan to lift everybody up into a situation where we no longer feel ourselves all to be lacking in global equity, such that we are angry and bitter and tend towards violence. And if we do that, the opportunities are enormous, because what it will help is to take economies which never developed into the full carbon economy and help them skip that phase and move straight to a post-carbon economy. And if you use the models that we've been developing in here, the process solves so much else, as I'll explain as I go along. So, what is the Common Home Plan? Okay, we were sitting at the start of 2019 and we were getting frustrated because the wonderful climate marches and the great work that was done by Extinction Rebellion and all the other organisations that were working so hard to raise the issue really had put it on the public agenda in a way that people couldn't ignore. But wanting to do something and knowing what to do are 2 different things. And when it comes right down to it, a Green New Deal tackling climate change is best thought of as a giant engineering project. It's not policy tweaks, it's not carbon pricing, although it's part of it. It's not mechanisms for changing people's behaviour, although that's part of it. It's digging holes and putting pipes in them. It's taking down plasterboard and putting insulation up. It is an engineering project, just like building sewers or building railways are an engineering project. And that's where we began from. What we began by doing was saying, okay, let's look at all the challenges, all the environmental challenges threatening Scotland, of which there's about 7. Resource waste, water. This is true of all of the world. We don't have quite the water problem in Scotland. But water, pollution, resources, soil degradation, carbon, biodiversity loss. There's about 7 basic major problems that the world's facing in the environment. So what we did was we started by saying, how close can we get Scotland's impact down to 0 or positive right across these indicators? So we went one by one and said, right, how is it that we are contributing to pollution? How is it that we're contributing to carbon emissions? How are we contributing to soil erosion? And what do you do to stop that happening? So we worked with, dozens and dozens of experts across an incredible range of areas. And when we started it, we had no idea if it was even possible to get to 0-0. And it is. One of the most exciting things that I have ever been involved in my career was the moment when I sat down and I went, my God, we can actually do this. This is real. We can get to 0-0. It was such a relief. I can't tell you. So we did it all. We did this through, I won't go, I'd love to do the full presentation, but I want to get to the full panel and get you in to do some chat. And there's far too much in this to summarise properly. But what I want to try and do is give you a basics of our methodology and some of the key things that we did. So what we did was we said, in every case, what's the best version of change? And then we found a way to scale it up and measure it, because it doesn't count if you don't count it. We've got to know how much it's going to cost. We've got to know how many holes there are to put how many pipes in. If we don't do that, we will not be able to understand the task ahead of us. You've got to build a plan to enable you to deliver a plan. So what we did was a number of techniques. We looked at places where it's already done. We found out how they did it and what their costings were. Or we found it done on a smaller scale. We created a unit price and we magnified it, multiplied it by the scale that we were looking at in Scotland. Or in some occasions, we had to make estimates based on the most comparative practice that we could find elsewhere. So, for example, we priced ring mains for a district heating system on the basis of water mains because we couldn't get access to the data, but they are more or less the same costs. So, having done that, we were able to sum up all of the work needed to get to 0-0 and price it. Now, this was in 2019 prices, but the answer was, give or take, it's about £175 billion. Now, that isn't everything. We don't know quite yet what 0-0 transport is going to look like. The technologies in that field have changed so remarkably, even since we wrote the book. Battery technologies have gone about 2 stages forward. So, for example, in the book, it suggested that cars will be battery and lorries will be hydrogen. But already in the last 4 years, it's quite clear that batteries are now more than capable of taking lorries as well, and hydrogen refueling is a nightmare. So that's a good thing. So it doesn't get us all the way there, but it does everything that we need. And then we did what we always do at Commonweal, which is say, great, this is what we need to do. How do we do it and how long does it take? So we worked with people who'd done different parts of this. I mean, literally down to the level of how many people does it take to insulate 10 houses and how long does it take? So if you've got a team of 10 working in a street of 10 houses, how long will that take? Multiply it up by all the houses in Scotland and you get a time scale. And incidentally, that's probably the most time-consuming part of the whole lot. Going around everybody's houses and get them retrofitted will take time. It's that simple. We need 6,000 tradespeople now, and we need to double that. And that's tradespeople we don't currently have. So it's 6,000 joiners, plumbers, electricians, which needs to, and semi-skilled workforce, and we need to double it quite soon if we're going to get anywhere near a 20-year target. So, £175 billion. Oh no, massive amount of money, isn't it? This is where I want to dovetail what I'm talking about today in Scotland in relation to the wider world. Because if you're going to get to net zero or 0-0 properly, then you've got to think about how you do it, not just what you do. So, what sense does it make for us to do what we're currently doing? What we are currently doing is importing extruded polystyrene insulation, which is horrible for the environment. Extruded polystyrene insulation, mainly from Holland, on large ships belching out fumes to stick in our walls. Right? This makes no sense. Scotland has got one of the least well-used lands in Europe. We've got the least well-used land. Our land is barely used. And the land that we are not currently using is all perfectly productive for things like hemp growing or scrub or tree. And there's a wonderful company now down in the borders which is doing hemp insulation. So what we've got to do is we've got to say what's the cleanest way that we can get there? What's the best way that we can do it? And how much of this can we do in country? Because bluntly, if we cannot capture the economic gain from the investment that we have to make in 0-0, we will not be able to pay for it. So what we did was we started to estimate how do you do this with the maximum amount of gain for Scotland. And in Scotland, we have an insulation problem because it's cold. And we have a land surfeit. So we should be putting these together and trying to identify how we use our land to generate the products that insulate our homes. Now, if you take that model and you do it again and again, you'll find that we can redirect a lot of the North Sea oil to producing the material supply chain industries, to producing the pipes and materials that you need to put in place a district heating system, and so on. Now, if we can do that, actually, just before we go into that, and what's really important about this is, one of the things that frustrates me a bit is when people say it's a global problem, carbon emissions, climate change. To which I say it's absolutely not a global problem. It's an incredibly local problem. I can point with my finger at every place the carbon's coming from. It's coming out your exhaust pipe. Couldn't get much more local than that. It's coming out your chimney, your boiler flue. You can't get more local than that. It's coming out the power stations. I can tell you it's coming out of the fields. I can tell you where the carbon's coming from. It is not about international treaties, although that'll be part of it. It's about getting our fingers out and identifying where this is happening, why it's happening, and how we stop it. If you do that, the first thing you'll realise, the first thing I realised was, every single country in the world will have a different Green New Deal. We have wind and a sparse population. Our energy solutions are easy. The south of England has wind, but not much available land and an incredibly dense population. Its energy solutions will be more difficult. We all have gains and advantages. Their ability to generate solar is better than ours. These will all be bespoke. So this is my question. If that's what it looks like for Scotland, what does it look like for Somalia, say? What are their problems? How do we identify this global Green New Deal that lifts them up by leveraging the resources that they've got in their country, and it does not become another transitive charity job by the developed north of dumping our wind turbines and our solar panels into their economies? Now, that lesson, what we can do in Scotland to make this possible, it's called green reindustrialisation. I might, if I've got time, I've got about 10 minutes or so. I might come on to green import substitution reindustrialisation. Oh my God, I hate some of these terms. But I always run out of time. It's inevitable. I'll do my best. So what we're looking at, what we're trying to do here is find comprehensive ways of linking the need to regenerate and change our economies with the need to decarbonise in a place-specific way. And if you do it, we did all the calculations in this. If you do it and you model it, so we got the model of Scotland's economy. Now, the scale of the change that we are talking about in this shift is difficult to model because it's so many changes at one time. These models work best if you change one or two variables at a time. But we did our best to try and estimate the amount of this economic activity that we can genuinely capture in Scotland, and we ran that through the model. And if you run it through the model, what it does is it generates about £4.5 billion of tax in a year that we can reclaim, plus about another 1.5 to 2 billion in direct income, because we're going to nationalise the energy industry in our plan. I'll tell you how if you're interested. And so what we're looking at is something like £6.5 billion income if we can get this right and we can capture the economic gain from it. So what happens, how do we finance this? 175 billion over 20 years. Well, we took the assumption this is multi-generational. If we do this, district heating could last 200 years. The houses, once insulated, will stay insulated. This is a one-off. This is one time. This is a post-war. This is Victorians building sewers and railways, or this is the post-war period building council houses and an NHS. You do this once. It's a multi-generational project. So we said, great, let's pay for it over 2 generations. Let's borrow it, just for notional sake, you wouldn't do it like this, but let's for notional sake assume that we borrowed it all up front on day one, £175 billion, and we just paid interest on that over the whole period. What's the annual interest payments on it? It's about £5 billion, always being depreciated with inflation all the way through. So it's about £5 billion, and we're generating £6.5 billion in income. The question isn't, can we afford climate change? It's what do you want to do with the extra couple of billion? This is the point. If you actually stop yapping, doing targets and virtue signalling, you sit down with a calculator and work out what the hell it is that you're going to do, you come up with these solutions. Right, so we can do all of this. And this is, incidentally, I should have said early on, everything, the other rule that we set ourselves was only existing technologies. No magic thing that's going to come. If it doesn't work now, we don't cost it, which is partly why transport's a little bit difficult because the technology is moving so fast. Okay, you've got the broad picture. What does this look like? I'll just do 5 minutes and quickly whiz through a couple of areas. Houses, it's very straightforward. We've got to stop. Actually, no, wait a minute. One more thing I do need to say. Our model that we're doing this in Scotland just now is mad. It's utterly mad. We have privatised the entire climate change activity. So let me give you a ballpark idea about what this is like. What we are doing is we're lobbing grants up in the air and saying, there we go and find another £5,000 of your own and put in an air source heat pump. An air source heat pump costs about 15,000 to install and lasts for about 20 years. So you're paying basically £1,000 a year for the capital in a air source heat pump. Then you've got to actually pay for the electricity, right? You're going to buy, the average person, if we go air source heat pumps, you'll have 3 in your life. You'll spend £50,000 on air source heat pumps over your life. And they come to, one off comes to about 2/3 of the price of a district heating system, right? If we do it collectively, everything changes. So I put this to everybody. If we were trying to build a sewer system the way that we're trying to decarbonise, how would we get on? Every house would get a grant to build, 10 metres of sewer? How's that working? We've actually modelled what this means. So we've got a paper that's waiting for publication. We think it's about 30% more expensive to do it the way that we're doing it, simply because of the privatisation. We are literally sending teams of joiners to a street to do a house, to then go home again, and 5 years later come and do another house on that street and then go home again, and come and do another one and go home again. It is mad. It makes no sense. We've got to stop this nonsense. It is not climate change activity, it's virtue signalling. If we did what we are currently doing forever, we would never reach net zero. I calculated this. It's way into the next century if we keep insulating houses at this rate we're insulating them before we get anywhere near an insulated system, an insulated house with properly insulated houses. Okay, housing insulation, it's fairly straightforward. We know how to do it. It's old technology. It just needs people and a supply chain. So that's straightforward. Energy, this is also very easy in Scotland. We have more than we know what to do with. It's ludicrous. We've got so much energy. The question is, there's only one question, which is how do we deal with intermittency? And the answer to that is 3 levels of, again, if there's technical questions, I'm delighted to do it in the panel, but you have one layer of batteries for hour-to-hour smoothing, you have another layer of batteries from day-to-day smoothing, and then you need inter-seasonal storage, and we think that's where hydrogen comes in. Just let all the electricity that's currently getting dumped overnight go into hydrogen, put it in a store, and that'll see no problem through the problems for periods of intermittency when there's not a lot of wind blowing or we're not getting electricity from solar or other sources. So housing and energy, straightforward. Heating is the killer. Heating is by far the biggest problem in Scotland. And I've already explained why I'm not an air source heat pump fan. They are the definition of a privatised, individualist, neoliberal solution to how to decarbonise your houses, and they are filled with moving parts that break. You will be constantly fixing air source heat pumps. District heating is for anyone that doesn't know it, district heating is a process of putting in a ring main round a town or a city and sub-mains which then go to every house, and these take very hot water round to your house, and that's disruptive. You're going to have dig holes in every street, but you do it once and it's there forever. And the disruption in the house is minimal because all you do is you take your boiler and you switch it for a heat exchanger. And it takes the heat out, the hot water that's coming into your house, and gives you all the heat you need for it. And that heat can be heated anywhere in the ring main. So all you need to do is plug in any renewable source of heating at all. It can be recovering heat from mine works, it can be ground source heat pumps, it can be industrial heat capture, it can be solar thermal. In Scotland, I personally wouldn't use an awful lot of solar PV. We've got so much wind, there's no point. If you've got space for solar, use it to heat water. You can store heat really easily. Build a reservoir, fill it with gravel, fill it with water, put heat exchangers in it, heat it, put an insulated cap over the top of it, heat it all summer, take the heat back out all winter. It's really easy. We've just got to plan it and do it. Another tricky one, well, I already pointed out that transport's difficult. What we can do is get our charging infrastructure right. And currently we're doing exactly the wrong thing. The Scottish Government a year and a half ago privatised it. They privatised all the charging in Scotland. It would make you great. Land is difficult. It's just, I mean, I come from a farming area, and we need to work with farmers to change farming practices to move towards eco-agriculture, where we are regenerating the soil as we use it. No time to talk about that just now. Actually, you know what? I'm going to jump. There's a whole section, there's 10 sections in this. There's a whole section on resources. What should we be using? How do we get out of plastic? Well, the other thing is, Scotland's got hundreds and hundreds of land. Bioplastic is just waste biomaterial. If you've got a lot of land, plant a lot of stuff, make bioplastic, become a world leader, hooray! Let's just do these things and get on with it in Scotland. But the last point that I want to make is about us. And Ian will talk about this a little bit more, because this is his expert area. Us as a species, us as a country. We need to change how we think about our relationship to our lives. And I'm only going to give you one example. You all assume that what makes you happy is buying stuff, because you've been trained to believe this, and you think a shopping mall is a good place as opposed to a hellhole, right? And we've been trained to think this so much. But what if we weren't buying stuff to throw it away again, to buy more stuff to throw it away again in an endless cycle? What if, rather than owning 4 washing machines in our life, we had one really, really good washing machine? It would cost maybe twice as much to build, but it would be designed to be incredibly robust and replaceable, repairable at every stage, modernisable. Washing machines don't, technology doesn't change, it just does the same thing forever. And then if you're manufacturing that, the problem is that our economy makes you want to buy cheap things, and therefore we cut every corner in manufacturing to save £5. But that doesn't matter if you go to leasing, because if you lease that washing machine over 30 years, it doesn't matter that it costs twice as much to build. We could build it in Scotland. We could have a mass manufacturing plant in Scotland, because you're spreading the cost. And now the marginal cost of saving £5 doesn't make any sense. Take that concept. Lease, don't own, borrow and rent, and then we can change our lives round about. Because rather than kidding ourselves on that we were happier because we spent a day in a shopping mall buying something we ended up not really liking that much, we can lease it, and if we don't like it, we can send it back. Meanwhile, we can spend our time with our friends and our loved ones, relaxing, socialising, being creative, participating, arts, hobbies, getting engaged in your community. Because when it comes right down to it, the mental health crisis that we are in, and we are in a mental health crisis, is because you've been told that you can chase happiness at the end of a shopping receipt. And everybody knows this is not true. Happiness is a thing which comes from achievement and relationships in a world in which we live. If we do that, if we build a world in which we can have more of everything, and we can have more of everything, we just don't have to own it all the time. Do you try the violin, don't like the violin, swap it for a trumpet. Don't buy it, lease it, it'll all be fine. We can have access to better stuff than we have just now, more stuff than we have just now, at much less cost than we have just now, and waste a hell of a lot less of our precious time than we do just now. This agenda is not about sacrifice. It is a massive opportunity to tackle every single one of the shitey problems that beset our society and our world. If we can do this in Scotland, we can do this at the globe. If this can create the outcomes that I believe it can, this changes the world, and it leaves us in a place where we can live comfortably within our resources and exist friendly towards each other in a world where we're happy, because we are no longer constantly chasing a profit that doesn't gain us anything anymore. And that is roughly the Common Home Plan. Others will give you their impressions just now, and you can ask all the questions you want about this, or you can get copies of it over there, and you can find out the exact megawatt power that we are going to need to take all of Scotland's cars off of petrol and onto electricity. Thanks for listening.